All was quiet in the pig pen. They piled upon each other to warm themselves from the cold of the night in Aberfoyle. There was the sound of country music coming from the garden nearby, where a crowd of humans gathered to drink and chatter. The sound of footsteps approached the pen and a few hogs woke from their slumbers. A woman's voice spoke up. "Why do you want to bring me all the way out of here, Stevie?" "It's bloody dark. Smells too." I dunno. Just wanted to talk to you a bit more is all." Stevie was gripping his can of Tooheys New. The woman had her own glass of red, which was spilling out into the soil every time she took a step towards the pen. "Yeah, it's fine. I just hope it's not serious or anything." They both leaned against the main gate of the pig pen and Stevie said, "Nah, it's not serious or anything." "It is, but it's not at the same time, you know what I mean?" She shook her head and leaned into the fence beside him. "Not really, I'm bit pissed and all, but you know you can tell me anything." Stevie gripped his can a bit tighter and said, "Well, I didn't really want to say anything really, just you know." She turned to meet his eyes and her confusion was met by his mouth locking into hers. They held it for a second before she leaned back. He looked back at her in desperation to gauge her reaction. It wasn't what he hoped for. "Geez, Stevie, we can't be doing that kinda shit. We're cousins." "Yeah, I know, but we're second cousins, so it's not like it's illegal or anything." She stumbled back and started walking back to the garden. "It's just not right, okay?" As she walked further away, Stevie shouted out, "Just don't tell anyone, will you?" When he heard no response, he took a big swig from his Tooheys can and dropped it into the pig pen on the other side of the fence. "Fuck." He lowered his head and kicked the wooden plank that was nailed horizontally across the gate. The wood cracked and his toe ached from it, but he didn't care. He had bigger problems than a split fence. One of the pigs trotted up to have a sniff at the can and it managed to drain the small amount of beer that was left inside. "All right, Johnno," said Stevie. He had names for all his pigs and could recognize each one easily. Johnno was only a year old and he was usually the most curious of the bunch. "Have a good one, mate," said Stevie, and he sighed heavily before stuttering back to the garden party. Johnno felt a small buzz within him and a kind of soft dizziness occupied his mind. It was a pleasant feeling that seemed to warm his blood up, so he searched for more of that fine liquid near to where Stevie was standing, but there was no more sight or smell of it. As he inspected the fence, he noticed that it had been cracked inwards. He chewed at the wooden splints that had appeared from the crack and pulled the wooden board inwards. In a short time, he managed to pull the plank inwards enough to allow a large gap to form between it and the open space in the gate. It took no small effort to squeeze his barreled body through the gap. Yet before he knew it, he was on the outside of the fence. It would have been even more difficult to get back in, so he decided he might as well go on ahead. The lands in the outback of New South Wales were vast. Johnno only ever knew the pig pen. All he could see ahead was darkness with the odd dapple of suburban lights from homes and streetlights. A glass shattered from the garden. "What the fuck is wrong with you, Stevie? She's your bloody cousin." The sudden crack and commotion kicked Johnno's instinct up a few gears and he bolted into the shrubbery. He came across a tarmac road and sniffed about in its gullies until the beam of a 4x4 shone onto his figure. This frightened him even more and he bolted further into the wilderness. It was a tough night for Johnno. He tried to make his way back to the pig pen, but his senses were disorientated by the change in his routine, so he slipped further into the shrubbery. A pair of glowing eyes followed him within a lowland forest. Most likely a wild dog or cat. Again he dashed and bolted into the ever-growing darkness. A hunger came upon him and he was surprised at the amount of berries, roots and insects that the forest provided. His keepers had always controlled his diet. But here he could pick and choose whatever he could find. This newfound freedom delighted Johnno and he made the most of it. His tusks were small so he couldn't scrape the soil as deeply as he wanted to, but there was enough to fill his belly for the night. Just before the dawn, an awful fatigue set in and he found a thick bush to sleep under until the morning let in some light. When he felt his energy restoring, Johnno made to move again. The shrubbery of the forest provided him with shade from the heat of the sun, but the soil was not soft enough to wallow in, so he took the risk of leaving its protection in search of some soft mud. Outside the forest, the shrubbery grew low, and he could feel the sun upon his back. This would be worrying except for the fact that a pig's sense of smell is 2,000 times as powerful as that of a human's, and they can naturally smell moisture and direct themselves towards a water source. Johnno reached the soft marshy ground that lay about Boundary Creek. He bounced with joy upon the spongy moss when his nose led him to a quiet stream. He drank from it to quench his thirst, and rolled and wallowed in the mud of where the water met the soil at its shallowest point. Oh joy, sweet joy! Memories of that pig pen seemed so far away now. This was life as it should have been from the very beginning. But with freedom comes responsibility, and he knew that he must be more alert than ever. He was careful not to stay in one place too long, for there was the scent of unknown dangers around his presence. For the next 5 days, he adopted a routine of sniff, search, eat and nap, and most importantly, move. Keep moving, pig, keep moving. This routine brought about some benefits. He was trotting up to 20 kilometers per day, and the signs were already showing in his form. His legs were growing taut and lean, and he had lost a whole 2 kilos of fat in just those 5 days alone. But he was scared a lot of the time, and felt a loneliness in his heart. Fortune smiles on weary souls though, and one late afternoon southwest of Briarbrook, Johnno caught a whiff of something familiar. He ran up to its source. Lo and behold, what did he see, but a dozen hogs just like him. Well, not exactly, but close enough. Their hairs were dark and coarse, and they were smaller and leaner in stature. He admired the size of their tusks, which were 3 times as big as his. Some of them circled Johnno, and gave him a couple of whiffs. He whiffed back as politely as he could. They exchanged a snort or two, and found that they could communicate quite easily. This was a sounder group led by the matriarchal female pig. She was the biggest of the lot, and after some deliberation, decided that Johnno could join their group. The sounder group had recently given birth to 8 new piglets, and a big strong pig like Johnno was a welcome addition to the family. It was true that he was still soft from his life of domestication, but if he could survive for a few more weeks in the outback, he would most surely be beneficial to the group. The next few weeks flew by like a dream for Johnno. Every day gave way to a fenceless world of possibilities. The sounder group stuck their noses to the ground, and followed every scent that promised to satiate their hunger. They ate any kind of meat that was smaller than them, including the large variety of amphibians, reptiles and rodents. The matriarch had a particular fondness for bandicoots, and went out of her way to hunt them down at night, and Johnno followed her lead to learn the ropes. He was a fast learner, and quickly adapted to the new environment, and even got to breed with 2 of the younger females in the group. The matriarch herself was getting on in years and beginning to slow down, causing the movements of the grouper to slow down overall. One night, she went searching for a bandicoot or 2, just north of George's Creek, and south of the Basin Reserve. A pack of dingoes ambushed her from the thicket of bush groves. Had she been 5 years younger, she may have been able to fight off the whole pack, but old age has its way of toppling the best of us. Johnno and the rest of the grouper were greatly saddened by the downfall of their matriarch, and it caused much disarray within the hierarchy. But they pushed on, and one of the females who Johnno impregnated stepped up to the mantle to take her place as the matriarch. Even though she was young, her ambition set her apart from her peers. By that stage, Johnno had become a popular figure within the group, and her association with the charismatic runaway lent gravity to her authority. The next month saw the beginning of the dry season. Times were generally tougher during this season, and the wild pigs became less rambunctious. It was a time to find shade from the heat, and not to stray too far from reliable water sources, so they mainly stayed around the New Valley area, where the water was proven to flow all year round. By then, Johnno's physical form had transformed from that of a soft-bellied, domesticated pig, into a leaner, more muscular figure. He had become much more hairy, and what was once a bright pink coat had gradually darkened into a more camouflage-friendly tone. His tusks had also grown out much larger, and so his foraging skills improved immensely. It was just as well, because food became more scarce, and a new danger threatened the grouper. It started with the sound of dogs barking. They ran into the scrub lands, where Johnno and his family were cooling off under a eucalyptus tree. The sounds of humans followed the barking dogs. It was the first time Johnno heard humans in several months. One of the humans shouted out, "Go on, get 'em, Sammy." "Good boy, Hulk." The 2 dogs ran straight for the grouper. Johnno was one of the first to bolt. One of the older ones didn't make it though. The dogs pulled it down by the throat. The sound of pain was something else. Johnno watched from the scrubs. When one of the humans caught up to the dogs, he lifted the pig by the hind legs, so his dogs could rip into it more. Fucking brutal, mate. The grouper headed a few clicks northeast into the forested areas of Single National Park. It looked like their safest option. They met up with another grouper there, and Johnno got to breed a bit with a few of them. He was a real lady's pig, that one. They hung around for a few days, before moving further into the forest. Johnno wasn't feeling well though. He couldn't eat as much as he would have liked, and had trouble getting a decent amount of shut-eye. A few others from the grouper felt this way too. Their movements slowed. The sound of guns rang out from nearby. A shot whistled past Johnno, and his mate fell dead on the spot, when they were having a chit-chat. The sound of barking dogs started coming in from the north. All the pigs headed south. Several groupers going in the same direction. A chopper flew above the canopy. The groupers from the forest reached the open scrub lands, just south of the Single National Park. There must have been over 100 of them in all. Dogs with teeth and men with guns behind them. Shots coming down from the chopper above. All hell broke loose on the battlefront. Johnno's family dropped one by one around him, and pigs from other groupers fell by the dozens. Others grew exhausted, and hid in the bush until the dogs sniffed them out. Johnno was in the grips of a fever, but the adrenaline spurred him on. He ran across a highway, and headed towards Red Hill. When there was no breath left inside him, he plopped on his side by a wattle bush. He waited for the dogs to come, but they never did. The chopper's drone faded away too. He lay still until the night set in. When he tried to get up, his legs wouldn't budge. So he waited even longer, until his energy recovered. But it never did. His fever grew stronger and his belly ached. He started seeing visions in the night. A pair of glowing eyes watched him from the brush. Then another pair, and another. They closed in on him, and opened up their jaws. Johnno didn't mind though. No complaints, mate. He did it all and then some. Didn't even make a sound.